Good morning and welcome to our People's Podcast. Today, I'm your host, Amanda, and I have with me Waylon. And our guest is Jared Smith. This one's exciting to me because I have known him since I was a kid, since we moved to Mississippi from Arizona. He's actually related to my father. And so we were cousins, which was really interesting because he was my first Caucasian cousins. Prior to him, I had nothing but Mexican cousins. So it was a switch there. But we had great times, great memories growing up. We have knew each other all through the youth and then lost contact, 15, the last 15 years or so, 13. And so I am super excited to find out how Jared has navigated his life since then. He's always had a great head on his shoulder. He comes from a really good Mennonite pedigree. So there's that. So, Jared, go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us.
Yeah, Mennonite pedigree, that's for sure. Broke the mold on the Weedle side a little bit.
Right?
More than a little bit, I guess, is my understanding.
They're all ministers, and look at you.
Yeah.
Have you started your
I've
own church?
described this to a few people before as I was a poster child, as a poster example for Mennonite, like without a doubt.
Yes. Yep.
So,
Agreed.
yeah, the name is Jared Smith. Above 40 years old, been out for, oh, shoot, not quite 20, 18, something like that. Um, and left the community probably 4 years after that and moved out to Arizona. Um, and yeah, left completely. We had an opportunity to like completely break the ties. And it was literally one of the best things we did, as far as like personal health and well-being, and as far as like life and business and seeing more things and all those things. Um, Started a family probably a couple years after that, and now my daughter turns 15 today. Um, so, like, I would say I have a son as well. He's 12, and I don't know how else to say that, but I have like a flat out amazing life. Um, um, Not what we were told when we were leaving. But without a doubt, going back all the way back, I can say that leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Without a doubt, I, there's a lot about me that I had no concept, no understanding of, when I was going through it. I was very much in a very entrance level version of this Jared Smith person. I didn't know anything about true spirituality. It was all given beliefs. Um, and I can remember when we were leaving. So if I remember correctly, we were approaching meetings, and all of a sudden, to me, like completely out of the blue, Chelsea, my wife, was like, Jared, she's like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, I'm remembering now. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I can't go through another revival, another series of meetings and say I do and say I am and be a hypocrite. Like I just can't do this. And it like messed me up. I vividly remember feeling deeply that like, okay, well, I'm now the guy with the fucked up family. Like, of course I love my wife. But now we're split. Like, which one of us is sleeping on the couch? Like, that kind of, because every belief I had around this stuff, I had like back in those days, a lot of us children were sheltered from any of the stories of, divorce and one person leaving and things like that. Like those were, the narrative was very carefully spoken to you. And so I had no belief system to fall back on. And all I knew was, wow, okay, my life is like, this is wild. And never was there a concept, a an idea, a thought of me leaving. Like that was like I only am a Mennonite, like 100%. That's it, nothing else. And we lived outside of town just a little bit, and we had this gravel road. And 3 days later, I can remember exactly where the spot is. It was like a light switch was turned off inside, like the core of who I am. And like for 3 days, I was like playing this narrative in my head, like, okay, I don't know how to continue. Like, of course I'm going to continue, but I don't know what this means. And in an instant, my soul said, "You too are leaving." And like I knew that I could not continue inside. I knew that I had to leave. And this is a big story that's connected to 15 years later or something. And I had no understanding of what this was, like how to read it, how to respond, or nothing. But I knew I was leaving, and we didn't really just tell people we were leaving, but we kind of just left. Um, I like again, young kid, immature kid, knew nothing about life, like only knew sheltered. I remember, if I remember correctly, I was on the sound committee. So I was the guy that was running the mic and all that stuff, and just didn't show up for revivals, didn't tell anybody, just didn't show up and was gone. Um, so like didn't handle things with grace in any which way. I don't remember how it came across with my parents,
I was
but
going to
I
say
just
you
remember,
worked with your folks.
yes.
And so
And
it took you from Chelsea. And just so our audience know, his wife did not grow up a Holdeman. They joined when she was 13, was it?
something like that, 14, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Um, okay, so it took you from the day she told you to 3 days for you to know.
Yes. And during that time frame, like Chelsea's mom came over and she was talking about her leaving and stuff. And like I told her to her face that she's going straight to hell. Like that's the only belief system that I knew. So like hardcore all the way on that side of the road to completely the opposite, hardcore. And I do not recall any of the conversation with my mom and my dad. I remember Justin talking a little bit to me. I remember Joel like lipping off to me. Um, I remember that there was this Vivian Stoppel letters going around, and everybody was blaming Vivian Stoppel, like Jared, you can't be reading these letters, and I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about.
Okay.
I've never been given the letters. I didn't see the letters. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not related.
Well, that's probably because of me. So I left very shortly before you and Chelsea,
Yeah.
and I left citing the Vivian Stoppel letters because not I didn't leave because of that, but that opened my eyes tremendously, and it gave me the confidence to say this feels like truth to me. So, and Vicky was the one that gave me those letters, so that's most likely why they looped you in with them too.
Yeah, I knew that Vicky was attached to him. I
Yeah.
was able to find a copy of them like later afterwards. And let's see, I can remember Uncle Errol was one of my favorite uncles. He was the minister, of course, the head guy, and I always had a very good relationship with him. Um, and so he set up what do they call it when they have a group of elders come by, and so like people from congregations that I wasn't really associated with, Brooksville, Macon. There was like, if I remember correctly, there was 6 or 8 different ministers, like head ministers, came out and asked, like they arranged this and wanted to have a conversation with me and tried to, tell me I was deceived and to fix me. And um, they they couldn't answer. I don't remember them. I remember one. They had three. I had 3 questions that they just couldn't fix, and these things came to me out of the blue. And I remember talking about them. I'm like, you can go to any youth girl that's wearing a head covering, a prayer covering, this little bun, and you can ask them why they do it. And they will all quote scripture. They will all say what they've been taught to say, and none of them have a belief on it. And they just couldn't, like, I don't remember how long. It was a very long meeting. I was like, okay, I will gladly go meet because I don't want to be deceived. And I had an open conversation. I answered everything, did not run from it. I, for some reason, do not recall being scared. And then so then we were gone, and we received a excommunicado letter from the West Point Mennonite congregation, which I so wish I would have saved. I can remember for probably, I want to say, a year and a half afterwards, all these beliefs that we were given, that, like, my Uncle Errol, the guy that I loved, and I still do, I still love him. I can remember him telling me inside this meeting that, you're if you are fortunate enough to have kids, that they're going to, have bad habits in 5 to 10 years. You'll be stuck on stuff, and the whole narrative that you're given, that there is no life outside of this. And so for a year and a half or two, in the back of my mind, it was always there, that, like, I was not resolute in who I was. I had this, what if scenario. And of course, this is like before all of my major darkness, but, like, I had a lot of darkness in me from my dad, and it hadn't yet reared its ugly head. And I was still working with my family. And I was coming back, I think, from a job in Tupelo. So I was north of town by 30, 45 minutes or something, coming in. And it was a little bit late in the afternoon. And one of my second moms, so I had a few mother figures inside the West Point community. And one of them called me, and she's like, Jared, she's like, I just want to personally invite you. We're having this potluck, this Thanksgiving. I don't remember what it is. It was some community dinner. And she's like, I know you love strawberry rhubarb pie, and I'm making strawberry rhubarb pie just for you, and I will save you a slice, and I would like to invite you to come. If I remember correctly, Chelsea and you were together. And I think Chelsea and you went there because I was running late. I was coming back like at 6 o'clock or 6:30 or something like that. And I don't remember all the details, if it was over the phone or what, but Chelsea and I prayed. We were like, look, if we're deceived, and I remember feeling very strongly with this, if we're deceived, I want to know. I don't want to be deceived. I want to follow the path that I'm supposed to follow. And if I made a bad choice, then I will completely own up for it. I really want to know. And I was very earnest about this. And this is awesome looking back with what I experienced consciousness wise long time later than that. And so the way I recall it is Chelsea and you went there, and I went separately. And so you guys had been there, and I remember walking in. It was going inside the school is where it was at. And I'm like, okay, I know that expelled Mennonites are very weird in these things, and they stick in the corners. They don't really talk to people. I'm not doing that. I walked in, I faced everybody that would look at me. I didn't avoid anybody. I didn't avoid my Uncle Errol. I remember talking to him, and I was not there 10 or 15 minutes. And I told Chelsea, babe, I have to leave, and I have to leave now. And that moment was the last moment I have ever doubted that decision from then on, because it was so incredibly clear that no, this light switch flipped for a very strong reason, and you did not make a mistake. And so I moved on, and I never, ever once doubted it back then. I had no belief that was attached to that.
Beautiful.
It was interesting, the dynamic with my family, because, like I said, I did not want to cause them pain. I knew how I believed just before that, okay, like, literally told my mom-in-law she's going to hell. So I didn't want to inflict that upon my mom and my dad. You know, I mean, I'm their son. How would they feel? So making that decision, or accepting that decision, I should say, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And still, it's wild how people don't want to discuss this. My dad and I finally had the deepest conversation, I want to say probably a year ago. And my dad and I have done a lot of healing. And um, that was the last conversation that we had that like was really something. And I can remember telling him that, like, you know, I brought it up, and I sort of forced us to talk about it. But for years, they wouldn't they wouldn't acknowledge, they just wouldn't have the conversation, and I would try to, you know, lean into the conversation, but they didn't want to talk about it. So I know that there was pain involved with them, for sure.
I'm glad to hear that about your dad, though, that you've had healing with him.
Yeah, I worked through that. That's a whole different story. I worked through that on my back patio. It was at the very beginning of my consciousness awakening, or not at the very beginning, but early on in that. And I was able to completely heal in like literally almost an instant, and um, had no pain. It was all wisdom. But my dad and I, for the longest time, if a relationship starts at zero, and zero is like not healthy but not negative, I was growing up, I was below a zero. And now we've moved to like a one or a two. So we actually have a positive relationship.
I'm glad to hear it.
I'm sure from the outside, like there's in many ways, I had an amazing childhood. And on other ways, uh, not so amazing, like full of um, dark. Like literally, this was the darkest place I've ever been, was with stuff attached to the, you know, what I experienced as a child with my dad.
Damage, I would say damaging. You had a very damaging um childhood as far as relationships with your dad
Hmm.
went. But this is your story, not mine.
Well, but it involves healing. It does. Um, when we left, and that was the next dark spot, was I could be getting groceries in a grocery store with my wife and see a mother react to her child, and it would trigger me, and I would be inside this like dark, like pain hole for 3 4 5 days. Folks would come out and visit us, and I would be literally messed up for a week. um like it was, no, my childhood, I try to be very clear when I say this. In Do we cuss on this thing? Okay.
We're just honest. Whatever you want.
I had some fucked up moments in my childhood. That's my perception of them. And you know, the way trauma is it's in the eye of the beholder. It's in the way that is experienced by that particular person. I can remember there was probably the way I would describe it as a year long, where I cried myself to sleep every single night. And I was probably 14, 15, 16. Like I was too old to cry. And I absolutely hated my life. I knew nothing but darkness. I hated it. I tried to leave home. I had set this family up, a Weedle family. I'll leave their name out, but I was going to move out of town, move out of the state, and my mom convinced me to stay. And like I remember sitting on the back patio talking to her, like, you know, but I don't have, like, this sucks. I don't want to fight with my dad every day. I don't want to hate my life. I have gone this far with the conversation, saying that I was in such a controlled environment that I didn't know that you could off yourself, that you could kill yourself. And looking back, I'm glad I didn't. But like I truly hated my life, hated every aspect of it for a very long time. And one of your old friends is the only friend I had at that time, and I spoke to her quite often, and I've thanked her every chance I get, because she pulled me through.
She just mentioned that the other day. She lives here now,
Where's here?
North Carolina.
Okay, okay, that's cool.
She's my husband's cousin.
Okay, okay, but like people can heal, and so that was dealing with my dad and dealing with my feelings of everything that I felt with. That was the next step of healing that I had to go through, and um, I don't know how I don't know how to explain that because timelines. I would say that phase of my life was probably 8 years ago. Probably somewhere around 8 years ago is when I I was just in the middle of the road. I was just a typical person who had a job, didn't have anything truly successful in life in any which way. Was very happy with my wife, was very happy with my life and all that stuff. But that was like, I didn't know anything. I had experienced so much more, so much greater quality of relationships and so much more in the world, as when you leave a very controlled society, and then all of a sudden now there's the real world. So I had experienced a bunch of that stuff and a lot of pain, a lot of problems and all that stuff, and but hadn't matured in life. And the if I recall correctly, the dark hole that I had from my childhood was getting louder and louder and louder. And you know how pain is when you don't give it a face, then it just festers. And I didn't know any of this stuff. And um, I have a book. I don't have that book, but I have a different copy of it. That book got stolen, but there was a book I had purchased way, like probably 6 years prior to that in Mississippi, called The Master Key. And I've read this book. I've given this book out to more people than I've given any book. It is not an easy read for most people. It points the needle towards high degrees of consciousness. And I had remembered like 6 years before this, 8 years ago, I had started reading it, and it's in 24 chapters, and so it takes 24 weeks to read the book or longer because you don't proceed to the next chapter until you've mastered the technique in the previous one. And I couldn't read it. I tried. Um, I got the book because I had noticed Barry Unruh was a person that he studied, he read, and I just, it was something I'd pulled from him. Until then, I didn't, I would never go to a bookstore and read anything that wasn't like just a story. And during this initial time frame, the book just, I couldn't, I didn't throw it away, but I just couldn't absorb the book. It was way past where I was at. And I can remember grabbing the book, all of a sudden seeing it, grabbing the book, and things just started clicking. And this is when, if I remember correctly, timelines correctly, the dark hole with my dad was getting the loudest. And so I started meditating. Um, did not learn meditation the way influencers teach meditation. I'll just say it that way. I learned from this book. And so I learned very organically, very spiritually. And during this time frame is when I I started so I started learning that there's more to life. And I had never been on Facebook much. I remember I had 36 friends because when I picked up Facebook, I had found that there was this one guy that happened. I don't remember how I got connected to, but this one guy that I knew about, I saw him at an event. And so I had set him up on the pedestal. And I reckoned there was something in him that my soul was calling for. And he started talking about core four. I would Google core four. I couldn't find anything about core four, and I was very intrigued, and it was the answer. and I couldn't find it. And it took about a year or so before I caught on. And there's this community called the Lion's Den, Sean Whalen. I'm no longer a part of it. It's very ego driven, but it's also, there's a lot of goodness comes from it. And I joined the thing, and this is like we were very small in life. I put the first three payments, which are $97 a month, I put them all on a credit card. I couldn't afford it. And started this and learned the core four in this at this time was called body, balance, being, and business. And so it's equating life into four different categories. And so I started down this path and met this other guy that's an Asian guy that is now one of my soul brothers. And I remember calling him, asking him to like coach me, and he refused to coach me, which was the best thing that he could have given because it forced me to look within. And during that time frame, I ended up going to ayahuasca with him, and drinking 2 times on ayahuasca, and had never done anything, and then go to that degree. And all of that time frame is where this radical awakening started to happen. And that's when I can remember sitting like in this weird position with my hand on the back patio, on the column on the back patio, and actually facing the demons within me, the dark hole around my dad, and literally just it all completely washing away. What I did, I didn't understand at the time, but what I did is I fully accepted everything, and I just embraced it and faced it. And from that point on, I can remember very, very emphatically that I had no more hate for my dad. I had nothing but love. I didn't blame him for a single thing. And all of my pain was completely healed in any of it involving my dad. And that, that pulling I described it for a couple of years that I felt it like there was a future version of me way over here, and there's a magnet, a very strong magnet, and it was pulling and influencing all of my thoughts and my feelings and everything. And that's the same thing that was causing that switch to flip at the very beginning. And so it's all connected, and I didn't know any of this stuff until, consciousness started being thrust upon me. So that moment lasted a very long time. That moment lasted, the consciousness stuff lasted for probably a year and a half. A little bit of darkness at times, just because it was so terrible much. I can remember, and this is challenging for me to talk about because ego wants to get in the way. Ego wants to be included. And so when I say anything about this moment in my life, I feel like it's being received with ego. And so I want to be very clear that this is not a separation from anybody else. This is not a better than, this is nothing like that. But I experienced a degree of consciousness that most people never will experience. I still to this day do not understand why. I was able to read every spiritual book that I could find and just absorb it and just like embody it. We have these aha moments that come and go in our lives. I was having, it felt like 10, 20, 30 aha moments a day, sometimes an hour. And I can remember driving on the 101 around town over here. And like one of the books that I was reading at one point, like I'm sitting there reading it, listening to it on Audible. This is in the middle of this journey, this year and a half journey. And my entire body is vibrating. Like me and this Asian brother of mine, his name's Chris, me, Chris, and one other guy, we formed a small mastermind during this time frame. And we met every single Friday at a coffee shop. And I can remember one Friday morning, we're there. And at this point, we had opened it up. And so there's probably 6, 7, 8 of us or something. It was always small, tight. And basically I wake up a little bit and I'm leaned over and my buddy Chris is checking on me and I'm just like almost hyperventilating. I'm breathing very strong because I have this rush that I'm feeling inside of me, and he's asking if I'm okay, and I look around the room, and I see that there's this lady over here, sitting probably 30 feet away from me, and she's extremely pregnant, and I was feeling the raw, pure, uncorrupted energy of that unborn child. Like these things were happening to me. At one point, I'm driving down the highway and I just start screaming my head off, like, please, will you stop? Like, I thought I was going crazy. Was Googling schizophrenia and things like that. Like, I genuinely thought I was going crazy. Um, but it's all connected to like that switch, that same exact thing. And if I would have never honored that, then more than likely this soul would have never been able to express itself like it is now.
Absolutely. You know, when we bypass those what spirit gives to us or hands to us, because we don't have to take on the lessons, but then we lose so much more than we ever know.
Well, and probably even further than that, like it's so easy to point the finger and blame at our childhood, and especially people like us that were born in the cult or the community or the culture that we were. But if you sprinkle in the idea that this is not a one and done life, then you're here for a purpose. And you agreed to come and experience this. And it's all happening for you.
Yep.
You can't blame. Like I don't know why I chose. I can say I can assume a lot of things. But if I wouldn't have been born inside the my twin is a minister. So like it was kind of destined. If I wouldn't have been born inside this community, this deep inside it, like my whole childhood, I've been a black sheep and I didn't know why. But if I wouldn't have experienced all of that, then the world wouldn't get to experience me now.
Yep. You know, that taking ownership is how we take back our power. And that we don't have to blame people like that when you were talking about that with your dad and that flip being or switch being flipped. You know, just yeah, when we understand that there's just no blame. Like you said, we are here to learn a lesson and lessons, and we chose this. That's taking back our power and not giving it away. And it feels so much better to have our power and not just be giving it away to everybody. And oh, I just can't control anything in my life.
Yeah, I it brings me to this other conversation I had with my dad that I didn't go into. So sitting in front of me right here is this spot where in front of my desk I've got some chairs and some books and some stuff, and it'll I've done a lot of ceremony on the floor down there, um, meditation, altered states, and things like that. And in one of those, I was receiving a bunch of I received this very loud, voice, whatever you want to call it. I call it the voice, where I needed to call my dad. And so it took me a week or so before I did. But I called my dad and I told him that, he's getting older. I'm certainly getting older. And I don't want, and I explained to him, I'm like, I know that we had a very rocky, past. And I want to be very clear. I want you to know I don't want something to happen in life before I tell you that I don't blame you. I did. I hated you, but I don't. And I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to tell me anything that you feel you want to tell me, because I don't want our past being something that takes away from your current happiness. And Furthermore, Dad, I understand. I explained to him a little bit about human design and some of these, weird things. And I'm like, you don't have to understand everything, but in a polite way of saying it, I'm a little bit of a freak. I'm a little bit of an alien. And alien is the fitting word because it means coming from somewhere else. You're not, this isn't your natural habitat. I'm sorry that you had a son like me because I'm sure you didn't ask to have someone that you just couldn't relate with. Like I don't want you to have any unhappiness because of me. And so it goes truly very deep if you allow it to. But it's more than just it's like you said, you mentioned that word, taking ownership. And that's like all aspects of it. Like you're there for a reason, so is he.
See, in my belief system, your dad and you would have actually had that agreement, soul agreement, to come down and both be each other's teachers.
For sure. On some level. Yeah. And like you can always connect these things back. Like, dad was acting the way he was treated. And, you know, growing up, I swore 2 times and I have not broken that because I'm not capable of breaking it. But like, okay, when I started making these connections, I'm like, I'm not going to continue this. I will not have that relationship with my son. Well, guess what happened? When Hayden was born, like for the first 5 months in his life, I could not hold him longer than 5 minutes at a time. He wanted nothing to do with me. I was still broken with my dad. I had not yet healed. That energy was very clear. My son has, I think, 5 open centers, maybe 6. And so he's heavily influenced by the outside world. And he wanted nothing to do with me. And I was wise enough at the time to understand it's not personal. Like, of course, I love him. But my point is simply that, okay, I said I'm going to break this cycle. I will not continue. But then I was given the most real example ever possible to actually mean it. Like, and me and my son, like my son has healed me, has been the most phenomenal trigger many a times for me to prove that, all right. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, and especially when my daughter, from like moment one, we were bonded. Like my daughter, it's like Mad Max and I, like, the Mad Max scenario, like as long as we have each other, anything can happen in this world and we're fine. Anything can happen.
That's awesome. So your spiritual awakening, you happened about 8 years ago or started, right? Is that what you said?
Correct. And it lasted roughly a year and a half.
Okay.
And then it took probably 5, 6 years of, so I had found out that one of the books that I read, the spiritual book, I found the author was living in Scottsdale, living in town. And so I found his website and shot him some messages, and he was able to meet with me a few times. Like we became friends. And so he was my first spiritual teacher. Um, Lost my train of thought.
What
Oh, so he
what book was
described
that?
it's called I Am.
Okay. Yeah.
Hang on. The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. His name's Howard Falco. And so he explained it to me this way. It's like you've been eating a meal for a year and a half. This whole long time. Now you have to digest. And all the books that I was reading, all the like not reading looking for information, reading because I had to absorb the information. Like it was very my soul was pulling me reading, half of this book, three quarters of that book. I learned Dr. David Hawkins was another phenomenal author that I read, and was like jumping into muscle testing and like measuring all these things. And so he described it as, now it's time to digest all of this information. Now it's time to absorb it. And I can remember him telling me, and I'm so glad he did. He's like, this isn't for you. And I kept it for myself for quite a while. Because I got my construction business is the thing that I wanted to burn to the ground so many times during this thing, because this is so materialistic. And so my construction business is what prevented me from going head on down the barefoot Jesus path, because I was very much going that way.
So how is your relationship with your twin brother now?
That one has always been interesting. That one has always been the best, and inside my family, like we've had the most conversation through this whole thing. I remember telling him once that like I can't get my folks to talk about this. Um, and he had his viewpoint, and we were like getting close to honesty, but we didn't get brutally honest. But it's always been good. We've always had that in a weird way bonded, like twins kind of thing
Yes.
going on, which is interesting because growing up we kind of had two different sets of friends. He had his and I had mine, in at least half of the way. Um, but yeah, it's never been that bad. I When he got ordained, when he got what's it called when he's invited to be a minister or something, when they asked the question and his name came up, um, I had started a path down endurance events, endurance running. I did a half Ironman, and it started me on a path because I could find a spot where I really wanted to quit life, and then I could choose to continue. Like very deep pain thresholds where it's just you find those spots, and it was calling me. Like this was um, more. And I had just run a 50-mile race, and trail, like 50 miles for trail, 13 and a half hours. First time I ever gone that far. And I'm at the house. I woke up. So let's see, got home pretty late that night, if I remember right. And so this was Saturday, woke up Sunday morning, and Chelsea's like, hey, you need to talk to your brother. And so he told me that, this was happening. And so I'm like, cool, like, okay, like, I don't know, I had well inside my journey. So it had meant nothing to me. I'm like, I want to support you. Like, and so I got a plane ticket, pulled Ever with me, and was on the plane the next day going to Colorado to like be like, of course, like I'm going to be there. Like I can't. And so I couldn't walk. Like I could barely walk because I was so, messed up from the run. And so that's why Ever came, because she was, Chelsea was
So
worried
she
about
could
me. Like, yeah,
she
she was
could
worried about me
hold your
flying.
hand.
Exactly. Like Chelsea's like, she has to push you in the wheelchair and stuff. I'm like, no, it's not like that bad. But yeah, so like him being a minister, in a unique way, just it brings me happiness. Like yeah. And like part of me selfishly wants him to be as much of a non-Mennonite minister as possible. And he surprised me quite a few ways. I think I can say this without anybody getting in Mennonite trouble. He once asked me for some book ideas, because I used to share quite a bit about spiritual, about consciousness, about awakening when all this was happening quite a bit. And I can remember telling him, I'm like, look, like I will gladly tell you book ideas, but you have to understand something. And this something is something that can wreck your world. You're a Mennonite.
Mhm.
You're a Mennonite preacher. When you read information and it clicks inside your soul, there is no going backwards. You can never remove that. So I'm not at all saying I don't want to give you a book recommendation. I'm just telling you, like, are you sure you want to read it? Because are you willing to accept the consequence? Like, life moves in a very cause and effect state.
So did he take them?
So yeah, I gave him the book recommendations. I have no idea, and it was, every time somebody asks me for a book recommendation, it's never the same one. It's like, all right, my soul's listening to their soul, and what do I feel like I have that they could offer? They could find. So I don't remember anything about the books that I recommended, and I have no
Well,
idea if he read them.
um, talking about being, a non-Mennonite preacher. I mean, Mark Cohen there in West Point, he's Ori's boy. He's he's not your run-of-the-mill Mennonite
Really?
preacher. And he had he depression really severely, from what I understand, to where he said he would get in the van and tell Amy, his wife, he'd be like, we can only talk about good things, good things. Let's talk about good things. Because he said the dark cloud that seemed to follow me around was just more than I could take. And so, okay, so through all of that, he learned a very positive um, outlook on life. Like you look for the good. You talk about the good, you bring up the good. You don't focus on negative or bad or what you could change or what you could do better. You look at how good you're doing already. Look at you, kind of thing. And so his sermons, like it's very interesting, the change. I'm watching because he was always a minister that dealt with me. So watching from afar, I've been I've enjoyed it.
That's cool. I Mennonites, and I would probably assume a lot of religions in general, but Mennonites I won't say now because I don't know, a very strong um, feedback loop where you you avoid what you're not supposed to embrace. Like you avoid the bad, and so you just turn the cheek. And in doing so, like all this, say depression, say trauma, so it comes over here and it starts rearing its head, halfway down the circle, maybe three-quarters of the way down this circle, and then you stop and then you turn and face the other way. And so the feedback, it always is there. And the way healing happens, and this is a much more of a complicated question or a complicated statement than just it's so simple. It is in the exact practice, but life is very full. So we have feelings, we have emotions that are very, very real. And so it's a much larger statement. But if you accept what I did with my dad, I accepted all the pain and it went full circle. And so it burned all of that energy off. None of it exists anymore. But you have all these preachers, avoid this, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. And so you have all this wisdom being told of, you're depressed. You can't be depressed. Just be happy. And
Well,
so
what I
then
think
go
I
ahead.
think I think what paved the way for that then for Mark was his saving grace probably is that Tim Errol's son Tim had had such a bad round of depression. So they had
Didn't know that
all
either.
oh my word, yes.
I
He
don't know anything about that group.
okay, we'll talk about some when we finish recording, but yes, so he had really bad depression. So Errol had already seen it firsthand with someone he truly loved. You know what I mean? His son.
Yeah.
And so when I think Mark came along, there was a lot of grace to give because now Errol had experienced it firsthand. And that's just what it looked like, from the stories I was told.
Well, isn't it interesting how inside a deeply religious community, you are told from an elevated position of authority, impacted with the fear of the most soul moving fear that exists, like that hell exists and that you will burn in it for infinity. You cannot fathom how long. Like when you have that amount of pain, of fear at a very young level as a child, and you're told like this all the time, and then everything else that you're told, like what I'm trying to say is you have generations of beliefs that are handed down, that the beliefs are only true up to that point, but there is a greater truth available once you ascend past it. And so it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, in one context, you're right, minister. Like, we're no longer in the Stone Age. We're no longer in the 70s and the 80s. And like, we have lots of stuff available. And so religion is absolutely phenomenal. Like, when we're in the books of old, the stories, the Jesus times, and all that stuff, people needed religion because that was a belief paradigm that they needed to go to. People were, so do you know, like Dr. Hawkins, the scale of consciousness?
Yes.
Okay, so when the world is resonating below 50, then something at 150 is so strong. And so religion was very, very useful to get us to that point. Now, a lot of the world's around 180. And we might average, above 200, 202, 208, 212, somewhere around there, which is, 200 is the demarcation line. Everything is positive past that, but underneath it is, you have the world against you, so to speak. And so we're past that. Like a lot of the people, religion serves a good purpose if the context is given correctly. But all these beliefs that have been handed down, um, and like I'm trying to say this, this isn't a truth according to Jared, and I'm not saying religion is bad because religion serves a lot.
Yes.
But my point is that there is also a greater truth than what a lot of religions give, because a lot of religions just give handed down knowledge. It's all regurgitated.
Yep. We did, or Waylon did a couple episodes on spiral dynamics, which kind of goes to me a lot similar with the map of consciousness in a way. Are you familiar with
Yeah,
spiral dynamics?
just a little bit. Yes.
Yeah. And so you're right. Religion does serve a purpose, but it's kind of here, and as you continue to grow and expand your consciousness, well, there's a lot of truths out there.
It's always like an onion. There's always another layer, another layer, another layer.
Absolutely. Okay, just because I'm curious. Relationship with your younger brother?
I do have a relationship with him. Um, I say this in a polite way. He's always been the baby of the family. And so this is interesting. What I experienced with my dad, um, twin brother and younger brother, both have their version of it that they, get to go through. I haven't had enough conversations about this, but from my understanding is they're both entering their phase of it, which I celebrate, not because of the pain, but because they're climbing upwards, or they can't heal what they can't see. You can't
The
heal what you
growth.
can't feel, I think is what the phrase is. And so, yeah, I'm proud of him. He's got a wonderful community. People love him. He's supported, he's happy. Um, and like, we just unfortunately haven't been able to see him a lot. The for the longest time I couldn't, because like I didn't have the money to go travel. And then like, well, sorry, I'm not getting the injection and going across the border. Like, I can't go see you. And we just, yeah, it just, we've never had, um, again, from the outside in, it seems like a lot of people said we had a great like storybook family. From the inside in, like my experience of it was we had no community. We had no, we were all doing our own thing in the evening. And so he's 6 years younger than me. Um, I literally, honestly, even though I have no pain, I have very, very few memories of my brother, my younger brother growing up. Like I have almost none. I've looked into it a little bit and I've opened the way, and so more are starting to come through when I like just receive them. But there was years that there's a whole big path of my childhood that I can't remember. I just can't. So yeah, yeah. He's baby brother, and I'm proud of him, and um, we're enjoying the time when we're together.
Good.
But you know how it
Wonderful.
is.
Yeah.
You if you don't have a relationship with someone, and through all of my experience that I experienced, brought me to the belief that family doesn't mean anything. Like you're told that, well, family's thicker than blood, or blood is thicker than anything else. And I'm like, no, I get to choose who I'm friends with. And there was a long portion of my adulthood that I didn't want my dad to be in my life. If you just don't have a relationship with someone that's ultimately very strong, like I don't blame my childhood, but like I can say I wasn't, we didn't play board games together that I remember as a family that often and have fun. It would end up with a fight, which maybe family members are supposed to. I don't know, but like, um, it's just a complicated way of saying, it's just a unique relationship. There's nothing ill in between us, to my knowledge.
Well, I do remember you boys showing us how you could make yourself pass out. I think by taking a lot of deep breaths or something like that one night after dinner. Needless to
No
say,
memory of that.
your father was not happy about that. We were very disappointed because they cut it short. We never got to see somebody pass out. And we didn't have boys, so my dad just thought he just laughed because it was hilarious to him, but that was funny. Okay, well,
I Yeah.
okay, so looking back, looking back, the you are today, if you could go back and have a conversation or give a piece of advice, give a piece of advice um to the you during those 3 days after Chelsea told you she couldn't do this before you realized that this was right for you also, what would you tell yourself?
Same thing that I have told myself. Trust the voice. Like you are never wrong.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Unfortunately, that is one of the things that we are taught to seek outside validation, and we're not taught how to listen to that voice within.
There was a study that I read. I'm probably butchering this, but it was somewhere around 70, 80%. No, 68, I think, percent of people, young people in today's world, they have no recognition of the still small voice. And think about it. Everybody's plugged into technology, everybody's plugged into outside opinions. It is so terrible busy. There's marketing, advertising at such an extreme level in every which way. All you get is what you want is over there, and there's a space between you and it. Like that's the story, the narrative
Yes.
that's given everywhere. And so people
Yeah.
can't feel that. Like trying to teach somebody how to
That
meditate.
realizing that everything,
Yeah,
yeah, very
we
good.
have our work cut out for us.
Yes, yes, we do. Um, okay. Is there any advice you would give to somebody that was searching, other than listen to that voice? You are never wrong.
Yeah, I would say be a little bit more vulnerable. Find somebody that you think you can trust and start opening up to them. Like this is not a world of one. Everybody is going through something that can help you out, and like don't hold it in. Like give your pain a voice, give your questions a voice, and just start asking people, because when you ask somebody a question, then you're asking yourself. You get to hear that question, and it takes questions to get through things.
It takes absolutely. Okay, and I have one last question, then I'll turn it over to Waylon. Um, one book, just throw out one book you would recommend that people read.
If it's just one, it's The Master Key by Charles F. Hannell.
Okay, perfect. I love it. Waylon, you got any questions?
Yeah. You talking about your relationship with your father is, it feels like that's exactly what I need to hear about right now. It's something I'm really dealing with. And I'm curious, in all of the letting go, accepting it, was there ever a point where he took accountability for his actions? Or is your process you went through completely independent of any type of accountability or admonition of problems?
Can I ask you the question that with me healing me, why would he need to be accountable for anything? If the healing happens within me, then like why would I try, like am I really getting healing if I'm saying that he has to be a part of it and he has to own something? Because that's nothing but pointing the blame. That's saying he's responsible. But ultimately, you're responsible for your feelings, right? So I would say I don't have an answer for that. I didn't include that in part of my process.
Beautifully
And
said.
this is challenging for us to reach the full place of, because childhood society in general just teaches us that, you play the blame game. Like we're taught very, very young. And the opposite of the blame game is a degree of acceptance and self-responsibility that the world does not show you. And so I'll just say for myself that I owned it to where it was all my fault. Every bit of it was my pain that I was carrying. And so I would say that I became accountable for it, not him. Have you heard? Oh, shoot, it's slipping my brain. Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian phrase. So ho'oponopono, there's this wonderful, wonderful, I guess I call him a teacher. He's a spiritual person for a while. And he has this ho'oponopono basically is this Hawaiian concept of thank you, I'm sorry, forgive me, I love you. And I'm more like I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you. And you're saying that you're sorry for not seeing it, you're sorry for not owning it, you're sorry for not recognizing your role in it. You thank you for the blessing and the opportunity that you get to face this to this degree. And I love you like you love yourself. You love the fact that this is who you are and that this is what you chose. And all of that, like this Ho'oponopono, he the book opens up where he acquires this this position where he goes inside this mental institution where the people there, they don't have long lifespans. There's like somebody getting attacked in the halls. Like these are the crazy people that no one can control, no one can rein in. And I think it was roughly a year and a half, they were able to completely close down the place, the mental institution. He healed absolutely everybody there. But you know, the interesting thing, he never once saw a patient. Every single day he went inside his office and he opened up the patient's files, and he chose, since it was in his life, since he was now there and they were a part of it, he was responsible. So he put full responsibility and he ho'oponoed them. And they all like entered society as normal functioning people. So like accountability is a very big thing, but it belongs to us, not the other side. And by that being a triggering comment, or by that being something that is a little bit challenging, does not mean anything is wrong or anything is bad. Like there's a there's a process. I did some training for holotropic breathwork is the name of it, and they introduced this. TAV came up with this concept called yoga of the cross, and what it means is you have the horizontal bars of the cross and you have the vertical beam. So the horizontal bars, those represent all of the triggers, all of the external validation, the external, you know, my dad did this. It's, you know, I can't afford this because I had a flat tire and now I'm buying new tires, and you know, all of these external things that he said, she said, but it's not from within. Down below, the beam running below the horizontal bars, that represents your past, your experiences, your, call it the karma, the all of the things that you've had happen to you. And so then the top part is where you want to go. That's giving it up to the great mystery, to infinite spirit, to whatever the label of source, God, universe, wisdom, whatever that is. And so when you stop going out here and you pull everything in, which means when you're triggered, you own it. Okay, you chase the trigger. Why am I bothered that, you know, I'm blaming my dad for this? And, you know, there's these stories running inside your head, you know, like, why is this bothering me? Like, my dad shouldn't have done that to me when I was 12. Like, you know, why did my dad yell at me? Why did I fight my dad? Why? And so you pull that in and you start asking yourself this, and you pull it down because it becomes you own it, you claim it, you seize authority of it. And you stop pushing it out on these arms out here. And then that spiral happens and you give it up because there's nothing but acceptance. There's nothing but, okay, this is like where you are right now inside this particular moment. This is who you are. And blaming yourself, like none of that, that's all external triggers. That's all this other bar. So the yoga of consciousness pulls everything, yoga of the cross pulls everything out here and you ascend it. And people, especially like dogmatic people, cultural, religious people, like, you know, that kind of ownership isn't really taught. And so, yeah, that's the long-winded of the answer, I guess.
So in that, there's actually a lot of rephrasing of a lot of things, such as taking accountability. A lot of people would say that means accepting the guilt or the blame, but that's not what you're talking about at all. There's I feel like there's a lot of words that we use when we're talking about our mental health or our experiences, and I feel like a lot of those words are being reframed in what you're explaining. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Because all you're accepting is the fact that you experienced it and it may be hurt, and you're probably still experiencing that hurt, but this is who you are at this particular moment. And you allow that thing to come full circle. That energy will never leave if you stop at 95%. And again, this is a very big conversation because pain is very fucking real. Like these things trigger multiple other things. And so like life can take a very interesting turn, and potentially unhealthy if you just like absorb it all and face it all, because my point is it's like an onion. So this one particular experience from your dad, you can accept it, but then it's going to open up 5 more. And you thought you were ready, but those are level 10 and you were on level 2. And so now you have 50 times the amount of pain that you get to experience. And you're proving that you're capable of doing it. But you're now a basket case because you now have a whole lot more recognized trauma, inside you to now process. But the philosophy still exists. And if you can't love your dad unless you love yourself. Would that not be true? And so can you love the parts of you that are hurting, that potentially have hate inside them?
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. I have had several things happen the last couple of days that just feel like they all lined up in perfect timing. And this conversation is one of them. Thank you for that.
Beautiful. Healing can take just all kind of faces. I just love it. It can happen anywhere. We were always taught that revival happened once a year for 2 weeks kind of thing. No, it just happened right now. So I love it.
If you want to talk more, give me a call for sure.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I have. So,
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to end it. Stay on. But thanks everybody for Jared. Thanks, Jared, for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your story with us. I really love it. We really appreciate it. I love Waylon. Waylon is my friend, so I love the fact that communion just happened between you two. So thank you. I love it. We appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
I want to get your wife on here to tell her story. So yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And if you would like to share your story, please reach out to us.
thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.